And welcome back to another episode 6, quarantine style of the Chips podcast. Tyler Melito alongside Ryan Amick once again. Ryan, we're not recording on a Sunday night, so I guess
we're breaking the schedule a little bit. Yeah. Feels good though. Got some sun today. Went outside, played a little golf actually.
You did?
Played a little Tyler sport. Yeah, I got into golf last summer, so I got new clubs for Christmas. So decided to break them out in the yard with some of the practice balls. I shanked a couple of them. You know, it was a little rough. I was a little rusty, but then I was getting my flow going.
There you go. If I remember correctly, I think I received a text from Ryan at one point. I just went to a driving range and broke 3 clubs. So
yes,
that's all you need to know about Ryan Amick's golf game.
But that was last summer when I was just getting used to it. That is a true story. At least 3. It was 3 or 4 clubs in a row, and then I just decided after the fourth or third club, yes, in one setting, like in an hour's time. I was just like, yeah, I should probably stop. I just stopped breaking all these golf clubs, especially because some of them weren't mine. I felt really bad. But
good job. Well, anyway, we're not talking about golf today, although this week would be the PGA Championship. So actually, today would be the start of it. So I'm very upset about that. But we're going to talk a little football, NFL, because why not? Let's talk about the last decade because we're in the 2020s now. The 2010s saw some very good Super Bowls, I would say, at least for us. The majority of our football memories, I think, will come from this past decade. So let's look back at the 2010s and the Super Bowls that were. Rank our top 10 Super Bowls from the last decade. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Sounds a great idea. I mean, part of the reason we're called the Chips Podcast is because what's the most important part of sports? The championships. That's what everyone plays for. That's what everyone waits for at the end of the year, which is why the NHL and NBA are kind of hemorrhaging right now because they finished most of the regular season. They're just waiting for the playoffs to find out who's the champ because in every sport, that's what they all play for. That's the most important part. So, yeah, why not look at the past 10 years or so when we have at least some memory, because we could go back a little more, but how much analysis are we going to have when we were like 7 years old?
I was doing play-by-play Super Bowl 43.
Oh, sure you were.
Yeah, all the time.
So where were you last year? You fell off after 43?
Yeah, 43 is my peak, and then after that, I discovered the halftime show, and was more entertained about that. No, I'm kidding.
Especially last year's.
This past Super Bowl.
This past Super Bowls.
But we're not talking halftime shows because you know what? Who really cares? So do you want to go 10 to 1 or do you want to go 1 to 10? I'll let you pick.
Yeah, let's go bottom to top.
All right, we'll go bottom to top. I will give mine first. Number 10 for me has to be Super Bowl 48, 2014. The first one ever held in an outdoor cold stadium in New York, or I guess East Rutherford, New Jersey. Seattle Seahawks 43, Denver Broncos 8. Malcolm Smith was the MVP of that game. He had an interception for a touchdown, a fumble recovery, and 10 tackles. By the way, if I'm looking off to the left, it's because that's where all my notes are. So don't hate me.
Yeah, you're not a computer. You're not just like people spewing all these stats. We're only human. I get it.
Then I'm a computer. But yeah, that game for me, of all the Super Bowls in the last decade, was by far the worst. I think part of it was so hyped up. You had that number 1 defense in the Legion of Boom in Seattle, and Peyton Manning and that Denver Broncos offense coming off a record year where Manning broke so many records, a single-season touchdown record. I think he broke the passing yards record. The offense as a whole was on fire, and they just came out with a dud. You know it was going to be bad when I think it was like the first or second play from scrimmage. The Broncos snapped it over Manning's head for safety. That's
safety.
Yeah, that's how part of the thing I looked at it was what were the memorable plays from each of these games. And that's the memorable play. You just see that Manning face in that snapshot of when the ball's going overhead. It's that oh no moment. And it's just that whole game was boring. The one bright spot, although I said I wasn't going to talk about halftime, so it was Bruno Mars and the Red Hot Chili Peppers performing at halftime because the game was horrible. So it ranks at the bottom for me.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't a great Super Bowl. And I have my list 10 to 1 as well, but I kind of put mine into 3 tiers. One for great Super Bowls, one for good to pretty good Super Bowls, like middle of the pack, and then a bad tier. It's the bottom 3 or so Super Bowls of the last decade. And that Super Bowl you just mentioned is in the bad tier. I'll get to that in a second. I don't think it was the worst one of the decade, in my personal opinion. That would have to be the last one of the decade, Super Bowl 53. Pats defeating the Rams 13-3. In my opinion, that was a very disappointing Super Bowl as well because it was pretty hyped up. you talk about explosive offensive, like the Broncos that are setting so many records, especially with Peyton Manning at the helm. The Rams that year, what they did, and let's say like the Chiefs game where they set a record for Monday Night Football. There was high octane offense. That was the year before. They were the worst offense in the league, turned it around with the top offense in the league. So they were very hyped up. Pats coming off their they had 5 Super Bowls at the time, looking to complete the dynasty even further. So there was a lot of hype coming into this game. It should have been an offensive affair, but this was actually the lowest scoring Super Bowl in NFL history. It's a boring game from start to finish. And honestly, the reason why I have this ranked last is I don't feel that either team really was worthy of making the Super Bowl, especially on the Rams side. Because you may recall, if you may recall, that was a controversial game between the Rams and the Saints where that pass interference call, if that didn't happen, we could have seen the Saints in the Super Bowl, and that would have been a Brady-Breeze matchup. That could have been a lot more interesting because it seemed like the Rams weren't ready for this. They were a very good team that year. I don't know if they were Super Bowl ready. They had Jared Goff at quarterback. He did not look great at all. They had 3 points, didn't score any touchdowns, had no offense.
Todd Gurley didn't play, basically.
Todd Gurley, yeah, he was injured too at the time. He was dealing with injuries. So that Rams team was not ready for the big moment. It showed up with their 3 points, which is terrible showing for them. And then the Pats, they deserved to make it, and then obviously they won it when they did make it. But they had a pretty tight conference championship game as well with the Chiefs, where a pre-snap penalty for Kansas City prevented them from going to the Super Bowl, basically.
Like 3 of them.
We could have seen
penalties.
Yeah, or we could have seen Patrick Mahomes, and then there wouldn't have been the lowest Super Bowl in NFL history if that happened. So I feel like this was disappointing. It could have been better with different teams that I feel like should have made it that year. And there's no offense the entire game. It's very boring. And we watched that Super Bowl together in our room, actually. And we were all hyped up. We had all the snacks ready, all our friends over. It was a dud the whole game. No one was interested. And the Pats won, which most people did not like as well. But, so I'd say that was the worst of the decade.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. It was a bad one. I'll get more into it a little bit later. I have a little bit higher, surprisingly. But what's funny is you mentioned how neither of those teams should have been there in theory. The Rams got on that controversial pass interference call, and they've now ditched the rule where they can challenge pass interference calls. So it just goes to show that, you know what, this is a human error thing that happened. Sure, it was an egregious call that decided the outcome of the game, but that happens. That happens in the biggest moments, and you see it in sports. And then with the Mahomes thing, the thing that still baffles me about that one is that the NFL has not done something about giving teams an opportunity to have the ball. I know they said if you score a touchdown in overtime, you win. I feel like that should be thrown by the wayside. I feel like both teams should get at least one opportunity to get the ball, hands down.
I think that's only fair as well. And you look at college football, some of the greatest games go into like 5-6 overtimes because no matter if a touchdown or field goal is scored, each team gets one chance at the ball. And that could lead to some really high-octane offense and just exciting moments in overtime as well. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, and then I think if you go into the overtime and neither team scores a touchdown or one scores a field goal and the other scores a field goal and tie it, and then they go into sudden death, that I'm okay with. But at least give both offenses a chance to win the game. Because crazy things happen. There's a penalty on the defense. That happened with, I believe, who was it? Was it Frank Clark who got called offside like 3 times? I mean, the Chiefs don't really care. They won their Super Bowl this year.
It was D Ford, I think.
It was D Ford. Okay. The Chiefs got their Super Bowl this year, so I don't think they really care.
Yeah.
But I agree. Number 9 for me, I'm going to go Super Bowl 50. Broncos, Panthers, 24-10. Broncos won.
Von Miller. Not like Broncos games.
It's not that I don't like the Broncos. It's just they give up duds. It was a dud of a game.
No, I agree.
Panthers were 15-1 entering that game. You thought Cam Newton swagged out. He had the gold MVP cleats before the game, and then they forced him to change them. Very upsetting. I think he should have worn them. And then Von Miller was the MVP of the game. I think he actually had a great game in that one. He had 6 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 1 pass defended. He caused the first Broncos touchdown that Newton fumbled. He didn't actually force the fumble, but he was a main reason for it. He was just in Cam Newton's head the whole night. And it showed at the end of the game when Cam Newton didn't want to dive for that fumble at the end. It's partially because Von Miller scared the bejesus out of him. And that was also Peyton Manning's last game, so I'm glad they didn't give Peyton Manning the MVP because they could have easily done it because he didn't play well. But overall, this game, for the 50th Super Bowl, it was so hyped up in just terms of what it was, and it just didn't really perform. And I think it also just speaks volumes to the other games on this list because there were a lot more higher quality games in the last decade, or at least they had more moments or had better storylines than this one. I feel like this one just didn't deliver that much for me.
Yeah, I agree. I have that in the bad tier of Super Bowls as well. But looking at number 9, I have the aforementioned Seahawks-Broncos Super Bowl that you had ranked last on your list. I flirted with it having possibly ranked last on my list because I remember watching that. That might have been the most boring because I knew it was over after the first 2 quarters or so. Like when a Super Bowl is like that, when you know it's over, when you have half the game still left to play, it's just kind of deflating and it's not exciting to watch. And then also look at the score, 43-8, biggest blowout since Super Bowl 27. Never like to see a blowout like that in such an important game like this. And like you mentioned, Broncos' first play of the game, this is one of the best offenses we've seen in recent memory. They give up a safety that ruins their momentum, leads to Seahawks score, and they just run with it from there. And then you look at the beginning of the second half, they return a kick for a touchdown, and then at that moment you knew it was over. Very disappointing game because as you mentioned this also, best defense versus best offense. We learned the most part in this that defense kind of wins championships, or at least in this scenario it did.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. I think circling back to that Broncos Seahawks game, just like you said, you knew it was over the moment the Broncos snapped the ball over Peyton Manning's head. It was just like one of those things like, oh no, here we go. And I think Demaryius Thomas set the record for most catches in a Super Bowl by a receiver in that game. So that goes like unnoticed, just to how bad, as my dog is barking in the background, how bad that Broncos team played that game. Their defense played horribly. Their offense played horribly. But mainly the Seahawks defense came to play.
Yeah.
Number 8 for me, I'm going to go with Super Bowl 53, the Patriots-Rams game, because although it was a low-scoring affair and it had that not so great, like there wasn't as much offense as we expected given these two teams, at least we knew the outcome. Or like the outcome wasn't decided until the end. Brady throws that touchdown to Gronkowski, I think, in the fourth quarter, and you're like, okay, the Patriots are going to win. And then the Rams started driving and turned the ball over. Like there was some drama there. So sure, it was a low-scoring affair. It was kind of a dud in terms of our expectations, but you were still on the edge of your seat like, oh, the Rams are going to pull it out. They're going to pull it out. It was still close. Gronkowski missed a couple big kicks. And then Edelman was the MVP of that game. He had 10 catches for 141 yards. That I just don't get. He's about 10 MVPs from the past decade. He is the worst one, in my opinion. I think that should have gone to anyone on the defense or Gronk, personally. But, yeah, that game was just an overall dud for me. But there was just still moments where the outcome wasn't necessarily determined yet, where you're like, oh, I still got to watch because the Rams could pull something out. Those other two games, you knew. The Broncos were winning Super Bowl 50, and you knew the Seahawks were winning Super Bowl 48 early on in the game.
Yeah, there's a little more excitement towards the end of Super Bowl 53. It did kind of go down towards the wire. So even though there weren't many points scored, it made it a little interesting towards the end. I don't know if I agree with that Edelman point. I mean, he definitely was that Super Bowl as a whole was just so bad that like the MVP could only be so great in a game so bad like that. But I think he was really the only person on the field that game who performed at all. Like I don't think anyone on either side of the field did anything spectacular except for Edelman. But if you're looking at I'd say honestly Malcolm Smith, even though he's more surprising and he did have a little more of an impact, I'd still put Edelman towards middle pack there. But looking at number 8, still in my bad tier of Super Bowls. You mentioned this already, the Broncos and Panthers Super Bowl 50. There's a lot of marketing towards that. This is a half-century mark of Super Bowls in NFL history. It's supposed to be a great game. Peyton Manning's last game in the NFL versus the 15-1 Panthers, another high-octane explosive offense where Cam Newton won the MVP, and they were supposed to be a great battle. And I went back to watch a lot of the highlights for a lot of these Super Bowls, and to my surprise, the highlight video was 3 minutes long. Oh. There was literally nothing of note in the Super Bowl except for the Von Miller plays that you mentioned earlier. And he was pretty much the only one who showed up. That's why he won MVP. And it was both offenses laid an egg. It was boring from start to finish. There were 6 turnovers. It was sloppy play. And the Broncos didn't score on offense until 4 minutes left in the Super Bowl. So pretty much both offenses were out of the picture. The Broncos defense carried them to that boring win. And the reason I have it 8 over the other two that I mentioned is kind of a personal homer effect. I like Peyton Manning, and I'm happy that he won a Super Bowl and rode off into the sunset. So that was a little good storyline there. And it was a bit closer than like the previous Broncos game. So it was the better of the 2 Super Bowls for the Broncos, I believe. But yeah, it wasn't a great, memorable game either.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've covered the bases on our bottom 3 here. A lot of similarities. Number 7 for me, and I flip-flop a lot between number 7 and number 6 for me. We'll get to obviously number 6 later, but I'm going to go for number 7, Super Bowl 44, the game that kicked off the decade, the Super Bowl that kicked off the decade. Saints-Colts, 31-17. Saints won. Breeze was the MVP of that game. He really didn't play all that great. He went 32 of 39, 288 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The thing that stands out to me, I mentioned before, memories and moments. This game was the conclusion of that return arc from Katrina for the city of New Orleans as a whole, the Saints capping it off. But no one really thought that they could beat the Colts and Peyton Manning. Manning was firing in all cylinders. They had a great offense. Pat McAfee was the rookie punter. I just wanted to mention that because why not? And I just didn't feel like the Colts could lose this game. They were just so dominant. They were 14-2. And then you have the onside kick to start the second half. The gutsiest call in sports history, in my opinion, hands down, no doubts about it. On the biggest stage, you're like, we are going to turn this game on its side. Sean Payton said it and did it and executed. Had that play executed, it would have gone down as probably one of the biggest blunders in sports history, but the fact that it got pulled off, one of the gutsiest play calls ever, in my opinion. And then you had the Colts driving down 7 late in the fourth quarter. Manning, they seen they started driving, and then Tracy Porter did to Manning what he did to Brett Favre in the NFC Championship game a couple weeks earlier. That's what I find interesting too. In the NFC Championship game, Brett Favre throws a pass intercepted by Tracy Porter. Saints go on to win. Super Bowl 44, Manning and the Colts are driving down 7, trying to tie the game up. Manning intercepted, Porter, touchdown, Saints win. Just an electric game. I wanted Peyton Manning to win that one personally, just because kind of, I guess it's the Eli thing as being a Giants fan. You have to root for Peyton unless they're playing.
Yeah, that's why I was rooting for Peyton, like Super Bowl 50, winning right off into the sunset. It's like that Manning effect. Since we're Giant fans, we have to support Peyton too. Even though going to Super Bowl 50, you looked in the press box or in the box. Eli Manning did not look too thrilled.
That Manning face.
Peyton, he had that strong Manning face. He's like, oh, that was one of the only things I could say I had over Peyton, and now we're both tied. But I bet he supported his brother. He's just that's just what he looks like all the time. That's just his
Eli could say that he was. Eli could say he was 2-2 in the Super Bowl, or 2-0 in the Super Bowl, while Peyton was 2-2. So he's got that going for him. But yeah, like I said, it was just overall. The reason why I have it so low is because it really didn't get good until the end. You had the second half kickoff where it lit a fire under the Saints, and then the Porter interception to cap it off. But after that, there really wasn't much, at least that I can remember looking back on it.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good Super Bowl. I had some good moments. I have ranked a little higher on my list. But looking at number 7, now we're getting towards the kind of good, pretty good tier of Super Bowls during this decade. And I look at Super Bowl 45 between the Packers and the Steelers, because this wasn't a bad game by any means, but I thought it was kind of sloppy and it didn't live up to hype as well. There were a lot of injuries in this one. Like you look at the Super Bowls in the past, there aren't too many notable injuries. There were quite a few in this one. You had for the Packers, Charles Woodson and Donald Driver. Those are 2 pretty big losses for the Packers at the time. And then the Steelers, Emmanuel Sanders got banged up as well. So there are a lot of injuries. You don't like to see that in a Super Bowl. There were a lot of dropped passes. If you looked back at some of the highlights, especially on the Packers end, people like Jordy Nelson, who's a great receiver, they were dropping balls. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was trying to do as much as he could to win this game, and he ended up doing it. But his receivers did not help him at all. They were dropping balls left and right, and it was kind of frustrating watching it. Like, this is a Super Bowl. Like, you have one job to catch the ball. Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback. He's throwing it right into your hands. You need to catch these balls and move the chains, especially because the Packers got off to a fast start in the Super Bowl, and they could have pulled away easily. But once it got towards the fourth quarter, that's when the Steelers started to storm back and make this more of a game, which is why I thought this was a better game than some of the bad games we already mentioned, because it had that fourth quarter finish where it was pretty competitive. It came down towards the last possession where the Packers ended up intercepting Ben Roethlisberger and sealing their Super Bowl victory. But also mentioning Ben Roethlisberger, he had 2 picks, didn't play it all too well. So I thought this game was decent. It was pretty close scoring at the end, 31-25, one-score game. And Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl. Who knows if he'll ever win another one. So it's a pretty decent Super Bowl in terms of the 2010s.
Yeah, I have it a little bit higher, that Super Bowl. I think there's something about that one for me that stood out. But I understand your reasoning behind it, having it so low on your list or toward the bottom half. Because there were some moments where it's like these guys are playing for the biggest game in their lives, and maybe those drop passes were attributed to nerves or who knows, because it wasn't necessarily the gameplay. Like you mentioned, the injuries don't help at all. Number 6, for me, pains me to do it because I'm going to go against our New York Giants. I have them here, Super Bowl 46, 2012, Giants, Patriots, 21-17. The lightning struck again for the Giants against the Patriots. Similar to 2008, the Giants were viewed to have no chance winning that game, and then Eli Manning pulls a rabbit out of his hat, goes 30 of 40, 296 yards and a touchdown to win the MVP. But most importantly, when the game mattered most, he throws that dime down the sideline to Mario Manningham, and you're just like, he can do that 100 times, and only once it would happen, and he just so happened to do it. Both he and Manningham. No way that play happens more than once. And it happened. Giants were driving. They ended up taking the lead. They were up 9-0 early in that game. You had that safety, the first score of the game. I think it was Justin Tuck getting the pressure on Tom Brady in the end zone. And then you start to think, oh, the Giants, there's no way this can happen again. Patriots storm back. They go up 17-9. And it's like, okay, game over. Giants, 11? Yeah, 11 at that time. I was like, they broke my heart once again. They failed on the biggest stage. And then Eli took over. The Patriot kryptonite, if you will. He had that throw to Manningham, led the Giants on a couple scoring drives. And then you had the Ahmad Bradshaw. He scores in the final minute. And you see, it's like, do I go in? Do I not? He ended up falling in with 57 seconds left, and the Giants were only up by 4. That was the longest 57 seconds of my young life at that point, because you're like, you hear the stories of Tom Brady coming back in Super Bowls past. You see it time and time again. And you just thought, oh, there's no way he's not going to come back. And I was hanging out with a bunch of Patriots fans, so I was even that more nervous. And then you see the play at the end. Brady throws it deep. Gronk tried to get it. Ball gets knocked away. And the Giants win. And I'm just losing my mind as an 11-year-old. Although I still act like one. I was actually acting like one back then.
Yeah, that was a great Super Bowl. It had a lot of similarities to their first matchup, which I'll get into once I reveal where it is on my list. But looking at number 6, I have Super Bowl 47, Ravens defeating the Niners. And this is one of the more odd Super Bowls I've ever seen, and one of the more odd Super Bowls in NFL history. First of all, a neat caveat was that you had sibling head coaches going at it, I believe, for the first time. I don't think this has ever happened in NFL history, especially on the Super Bowl stage. I mean, that's pretty interesting when you look at it that way. And there wasn't really much to note of this game in the first half. But once you get to that second half and the Ravens are up 28-6, it's looking like the Niners are done for. And then the power goes out after Beyonce's halftime performance sucks all the energy out of the Mercedes-Benz stadium. And for about 40 minutes, everyone's just like, what is going on right now? Is this actually happening on the biggest stage of them all? Are we really just sitting here? Ravens had all the momentum in the world. It looked like they were going to cruise to another championship. So for the sake of fandom and actually watching the game, it actually worked out pretty well because that led to the Niners coming back. And similar to another Super Bowl we'll get to in a little bit, that 28-6 mark at mid-third quarter, it looked like it was over, but the Niners started to come back. Their defense was forcing pressure on Joe Flacco, caused some turnovers. They were scoring, and then it gets to the last possession of the game. The Niners are in the red zone. The Ravens have that Ravens defense, which is a memorable, legendary defense. It's got Hall of Famers who are about to retire that season. Ray Lewis, Ed Reed would follow a couple of years later. It's pretty much their last chance to win another Super Bowl and solidify their legacy as defensive monsters. And they get it done on that fourth and goal, stop the Niners from making the biggest comeback at the time in Super Bowl history and winning their second championship for the Ravens.
Yeah, I actually have that one a little bit higher. If you didn't hear my little ooh there when you said it, because I actually like that game, but we'll get back to it a little bit later. But
I
get what you're
I
saying.
thought it was a good game. I just don't like that because of a power situation. That's what kind of switched everything up. Because if that doesn't happen, I think the Ravens run away with that game. So it got interesting towards the end, but I don't like the fact that the power going out is kind of what caused that. So something out of football control is kind of what would change the momentum. So I kind of I know it's not their fault, but I kind of penalized the Super Bowl for that reason, especially because before that point, it wasn't really memorable at all. I mean, the Ravens were crushing them. But I mean, I respect your opinion. I'll let you get to
Yeah,
that in a little
I'll
bit.
get
And
to
it
it.
was a good Super Bowl. It's in my good tier. I just think, and I was flip flopping between this and my fifth pick. Like it originally was at my fifth pick, but then I kind of flipped a little bit. So I think it's a pretty good Super Bowl. And I'll let you get to your next Super Bowl.
Yeah, we'll get to number 5. It's not where I have Super Bowl 47. I actually have Super Bowl 45 here. 2011, 31-25, like we said. Packers over the Steelers. Rodgers, he really came out. He threw for 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, winning the MVP. I think this is the moment that cemented, all right, Aaron Rodgers is legit. And after all those years behind Brett Favre, it kind of just should, maybe that's the way it should be. Like, if you have a veteran quarterback, draft a guy early. Maybe we'll see that happen now with Jordan Love. Who knows? Rodgers retires in 3 years, and then Jordan Love takes over, carries the Packers to Super Bowl. Might work, probably not. Jordan Love's not Aaron Rodgers, but Packers were big time. At least not yet. It ain't happening. The Packers were big time underdogs entering that game. They just didn't have the experience compared to the Steelers, who had come off winning a Super Bowl a couple years prior, and even they've won 2 in the 2000s. That the first decade of the 2000s. Ben Roethlisberger, he could have cemented his legacy here if he'd won like 3 Super Bowl trophies in 6 or so years. Pretty darn impressive, and they just weren't able to do it. Excuse me. Injuries played a factor on both sides, like you said. Packers got out to that huge lead. The Steelers started to come back. And you're thinking, holy cow, can they pull off this comeback? And then the Rodgers in that Packers team were just able to hold off the Steelers enough. And it was also snowing in Dallas leading up to the game, like a couple of days before. So that's just something that had a lot of people worried. You're like, when does it snow in Dallas in February? I guess no one thought that. And first season in what's his face? Jerry's World, AT&T Stadium. And I guess or second season, I don't really remember. It's the Cowboys. I don't pay attention. They haven't played in the Super Bowl since 1990 something. So, yes, I'm taking a dig at Cowboys fans. But yeah, overall, I think that Super Bowl, just something about it and how close it was at the end. That's why I have it a little bit higher, I guess, compared to you. I am on the different page than you are, but I understood where you were coming from.
Yeah, I understand with that too. It was a pretty good ending, which I think saved it from being a not good Super Bowl. But like I said, those injuries and the drop passes, don't like to see it that much in the Super Bowl. But going to my number 5, I have the Saints defeating the Colts, winning their first ever Super Bowl and their first trip to the Super Bowl. And as you mentioned before, they had the narrative of Katrina, the city of New Orleans rallying together against with this underdog team as the Colts were the favorite with Peyton Manning and legendary quarterback and a battle between 2 great quarterbacks. And it was a little slow to start, but as you mentioned, towards halftime, another thing we didn't mention before actually that was pretty interesting is that right before halftime, the Saints had a chance to go up, but they missed a 4th and goal. And I think that's what led to them going for having an aggressive approach coming out of the half and saying, we didn't capitalize going into the half with that 4th and goal situation. Let's catch them off guard, have one of the best plays or most memorable plays in Super Bowl history with that onside kick, which as you mentioned, if it went wrong, they would have got blasted for it because that would have been huge. Colts, who knows? The Colts could have ran away with it if they got it at midfield. Manning throws a quick touchdown pass, Colts go up, and who knows if they would lose that lead. So that's a huge point in the game. They'll always be remembered for converting and successfully making that bold risk, having it come true. And then a big Tracy Porter interception capitalized it, seals the game for the Saints, and the whole city rejoices as they're finally champions after a horrible tragedy happened not too long before that. And I think that was a pretty memorable Super Bowl. Came down kind of towards the wire. I had Peyton Manning on the last drive, kind of try to bring him back, and it didn't work out. So I thought it was a good Super Bowl. I flipped with the Ravens and Niners ones as well, so it could have gone either way. But it's middle of the pack, good Super Bowl, pretty memorable for the 2010s.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I mentioned it, and I forgot about that 4th and goal play, and I'm sure it wouldn't have happened if they had converted. There's no way you would have gotten that onside kick. So who knows? The landscape of that game could have changed dramatically had the Saints converted at the end of the first half. We're entering the top 4 now. You get some – I'm sure we'll see a lot of similarities, especially at the top 3. We got to get the 4 first, and this is where I have that Super Bowl 47, Ravens, Niners. The game that made Joe Flacco – the start of the Joe Flacco debate of is he elite? No, he's not. Don't say it.
Never elite.
Never elite. He had a lucky game. But neither here nor there. Like we said, the power went out. And I honestly – I'm not right. That's not the reason why I have it so high. I think it's – but in terms of memorability, you can't forget that. But it was Ray Lewis's final game. Like you said, I think it was Ed Reed's final game as a Raven. So the fact that those two legends can go out after such great careers in Baltimore, and they played well in that game, I think they definitely deserved some consideration for the MVP, possibly. And that defense held strong. They had the lead, and then obviously the Niners came back, which is part of the reason why it's so high up. You have the fact that, oh my God, because Kaepernick broke out in that playoffs. He ran all over the Packers in the divisional round. I don't remember who they played in the championship game. It wasn't Seattle, but I think it was New Orleans. I think it was the Saints they beat in that championship game. And Kaepernick, had he won that game, who knows what could have been. He probably would not be unemployed at this point because he'd be a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and you can't have a free agent guy still young. Who knows? But then you also have the Jacoby Jones kickoff return, the record to start the second half at the time the longest kickoff return in NFL history at 108 yards. Just an electric play, really grading the Ravens' grip on that game. And then, like you mentioned earlier, the 49ers had a chance to win late, but the Ravens' defense held strong. Ray Lewis, probably a big reason of that. Crabtree drops the pass intended for him on 4th down in the end zone. Or was it 3rd down? I don't remember. But neither here nor – I've been working all week. I'm sorry. I'm mentally
out. My brain's pretty shot too.
Yeah, and you think we're on summer vacation. So – but, yeah, and I think that play too, the Crabtree play, there was pass interference possibly. They didn't get it. And I'm glad they didn't throw that flag because you would hate for a game to be decided by the refs. That's the one bad thing I hate about sports, games being decided by the refs. We mentioned a little earlier with the NFC Championship game. But, the Ravens ultimately pulled it out, and a great ending for a career for 2 Ravens legends, one retiring, one leaving the team.
Yeah, great ending for Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. Looking at my number 4 for Super Bowls, I gave the Giants a little more love. I have them beating the Patriots for the second time. I'll tell you why I'm not a homer for this pick. This was a great Super Bowl. Going into it, there was, again, similar to the first Super Bowl between them, so much expectations for the Patriots. They were definitely favored, and they had so much on the line, just like when they were 18-0 in 2007, wanted to keep that undefeated streak alive. They had a lot of pressure in this game because their dynasty was kind of up in the air at this point. They had the 3 Super Bowls towards the beginning of the decade that solidified their dynasty, and they were so obviously a great team still after those Super Bowls, made the playoffs every year. Didn't make the Super Bowl until 2007 where they blew it. That was a big mark on them. Then Tom Brady gets injured. They don't make the playoffs. So the dynasty's falling apart a little bit. Then they finally get back to the Super Bowl. And who do they run into again? A familiar foe. Who this time, the Giants, they were a 10-win team going into the Super Bowl. So they were big underdogs now. They were a 9-win team in 2011 when they versed the Pats again. So even bigger underdogs. The Pats have the reputation to beat the Giants, redeem what happened to them in 2007. So there's a lot of storylines going into this one, and you would expect the Pats to come out on top because there's so much riding on them, and they were definitely the better team. 9 times out of 10, they probably would have beaten the Giants. But as we mentioned, they didn't beat them, and the Giants went up early. I think you mentioned this early. They were up 9-0. Then the Pats scored 17 unanswered, and it looked like, they're going to run away with this one. You got them rolling. You're not putting pressure on Tom Brady. They're going to keep scoring, and it's going to get out of hand. But then fourth quarter comes, and Eli Manning comes out of his bag, and he just saves the game for them with the beautiful pass to Mario Manningham, which similar to the Tyree catch, fourth quarter, game on the line type situations, beautiful, impossible throws that Eli Manning would never make on any other game except for the Super Bowl, because for some reason, fourth quarter Super Bowl, he is not phased. That's just where he comes out to shine, and the Giants ended up upsetting them once again, and that put a big mark on the Patriots dynasty, and they wouldn't win a Super Bowl until we get to the next 3 or so Super Bowls on our list. But I thought this was a great game in terms of playing wise. It was close the entire time. It came down to the last possession where the Pats threw up a Hail Mary. And if you remember, they almost got that. I was so scared when he threw that up, because I saw Gronk going up for it. I'm like, oh my God, if you catch a Hail Mary to win the Super Bowl on the last play of the game, that would have broken my heart. I don't think I would have gotten over it to this day. But it fell out of his hands. Giants won another Super Bowl, Eli Manning's second MVP trophy, and I thought it was a great game. I know I'm a Giants fan, so obviously I have it ranked high, but I think just looking at the past Super Bowls, with everything on the line going into the Super Bowl in terms of the actual gameplay, it coming down to the last second, another big upset, I thought it was a great game.
Ryan, are you sure you're a Giants fan? Because you got 4 Patriots Super Bowls in your top 4. I mean,
I'll admit it. The Pats make for good Super Bowls. I don't root for them to win, but I would like them to make the Super Bowls, because almost every Super Bowl they're in, aside from that Rams Super Bowl, it's entertaining.
Yeah. Now, whether or not they cheat to get there, who knows? But
all right. See, now there's
I'm mentioning a little
bias coming in.
That's just my football bias.
That's true. Yeah.
But the thing with that game too that's interesting, you mentioned it. It kind of questioned the dynasty. Like, a lot of those pieces were no longer there. Like guys like Rodney Harrison, Ty Law, Junior Seau, although he kind of played for them later in the career. Lawyer Malloy, Willie McGinnis. Those are some of the defense, some of the offensive guys like Randy Moss, although they didn't win with Randy Moss. You get my point. And I think after that Super Bowl in 2012, let's say it was Super Bowl on February 2nd, February 3rd started this almost decade-long conversation of, is Brady retiring? Is he done? And look what he's done since then. He's won 3 more Super Bowls, been to 4. The guy's just proven that age is just a number. And this has just been I'm sure we're going to talk about more Brady Super Bowls, because that's the top 3, if you haven't guessed it already, which one is slated there. But that was the time where you're like, is Brady done? I think people were calling for him to retire because he just couldn't perform anymore, or perform. Like, he just couldn't. It's the giant kryptonite. It wasn't the Patriots. It was Eli Manning and that Manning face of his. All right. Anyway, though, let's get to our top 3s. Very similar. I wouldn't be surprised if we have the exact same top 3, although I doubt it, because we don't think alike at all. For me, Super Bowl 3, or the third ranked Super Bowl for me, is Super Bowl 52. 2018, Eagles, Patriots, 41-33. Nick Foles and the Philadelphia Eagles, despite being the number 1 seed, they were considered the underdogs in each of their playoff games. I don't think that's ever happened before and has ever happened since. That's all because of the Carson Wentz injury, and Foles came out to play in that game. 28 of 43 passing, 373 yards, 3 touchdown passes, and the 1 touchdown reception. That's right, Ryan. Philly was born on that play, and you see it across flag football fields across the country nowadays. Players and backyard football games too. Just players and families and whatever going up, jet sweep or tossing it to the right, and then coming back and throwing it back to the quarterback. I know that was a horrible explanation of the Philly special. If you've never heard of it, definitely go look it up. But almost 13 years to the day, that's when the Patriots beat the Eagles in Super Bowl 39 in 2005. So you had that storyline as well. Like I said, no one thought the Eagles were going to win that game given the Wentz injury, and despite being the number 1 seed. And then the Patriots, they're favored by 4.5, and they just got embarrassed. Brady dropped that pass, and you're like, okay, Brady can't catch, and then Foles catches it, and that's Philly special goes down to history. You got the statue now outside Lincoln Financial Field. And I think the main thing for that, there were so many fluky plays in that game. You had the Philly special, obviously, the Zach Ertz catch that when he dove over the goal line, the ball was like popping out. Was it a touchdown? Was it not? Who knows?
That was easily a
Jeffrey
touchdown.
catch.
I remember during that year, everyone was questioning what an actual catch was.
Oh, yeah.
And everything was under review. That was a clear catch. That was just annoying.
I agree.
That out. Like, that was easily a touchdown.
I agree. The Alshon Jeffrey touchdown catch, I think, was like on the sideline. No one thought it was going in. The Corey Clement catch, I think, he caught a touchdown pass. It was like over the shoulder. He barely kept his feet in. It was like some really fluky plays. And then at the end, the Patriots driving, trying to win the game, and the Eagles defense, Fletcher Cox, Derek Barnett, I'm sure I'm definitely missing a bunch of guys. Another NFC East team, so I don't pay attention to the roster because who cares? Giants all the way, woohoo. And they showed up and ended the Patriots season right then and there, forcing the fumble, game over, Eagles win.
Yeah, you're right. We don't think alike because so now we're getting into my great tier of Super Bowls. We'll agree we have the same top 3 Super Bowls. These are all very good games. Doesn't matter where we rank them. They're all very good. But for third, I have the Pats beating the Seahawks, that infamous Super Bowl 28-24. All right, let me explain. So as we mentioned before, going into this game, the Pats dynasty was kind of in rux. I mean, they lost to the Giants twice. They hadn't won a Super Bowl since 2004. So if they lost this one, I don't think we could call this a dynasty anymore. Who knows? At that point, that's when Brady retirements were kind of the talk of the town. That might have came to fruition if he lost that game. So there was a lot riding on the Pats once again for them to perform. They're going against Russell Wilson, that great defense, great matchup. It was close the entire game. And then the Seahawks ended up going up in the fourth quarter. And the Pats started to come back, have another comeback, a 10-point comeback, in fact, in the fourth quarter, bringing it up to 28-24. Then this is where it really gets memorable. The last possession of the Seahawks and that crazy throw to Jermaine Kearse, which people were comparing to the Tyreek catch, but that was all luck. That wasn't skill at all. That was
so was the Tyreek catch. Stop it.
No, that takes some skill to put it against your head. It like bounced around and landed.
It takes immense
concentration. He was lucky. It bounced from here.
It took some concentration, too, though, for the Kearse catch.
It took concentration. It was a good catch, but it wasn't Tyreek catch. But anyways, that crazy catch got them within range to win their second Super Bowl, cement themselves as a possible dynasty because they had a great coach, great defense, great running back, great quarterback. They had everything to have a great run for years to come if they just scored a touchdown on the last possession of the game. But as we know what happened, so in terms of gutsy calls, we mentioned the Saints going for that onside kick. That turned out well for them. So we remember that as a good gutsy call. The Seahawks had a gutsy call of their own. Throwing it instead of giving it, it was very gutsy because instead of making this, it was dumb, but it was gutsy because instead of handing off to Marshawn Lynch, who was killing it all game, he easily would have scored. You throw it. You trust Russell Wilson to not make a mistake. And obviously Malcolm Butler, one of the most memorable plays in Super Bowl history. I don't think that makes this one of the most memorable games in Super Bowl history, but that was definitely one of the most memorable clutch plays Super Bowl history. Saved Brady, saved his reputation, won this game for the Pats, even though they really didn't deserve it. And they ended up starting another dynasty from that day forward. We win 2 more Super Bowls. So I thought it was kind of fluky. It was a very bad call. Any other coach would have, I'm assuming any other coach would have made the obvious decision, hand it to Marshawn Lynch, and this game isn't that memorable. It's still a good game, but it's not as memorable as it was if it wasn't for them making a big mistake. So that's why I have it as third. I don't think that Malcolm Butler play makes it one of the top Super Bowls ever, but it was a good Super Bowl. It was close, and the Pats came through when a lot of doubt was raining down on them.
Yeah, I mean, I have this one as my number 2. Come on. I'll just get right into it because you've kind of taken a lot of my points. The best defense in football, Seattle, they could have gone back. Remember how the Seahawks got here, too. They had to come back against the Packers in the NFC Championship game. You had the onside kick that worked. Yeah, the onside kick. The Gary Gilliam play, John Ryan throwing him the touchdown pass on the fake field goal, and then the bomb from Wilson into the end zone to win the game in overtime. Russell Wilson could have cemented himself with this game as a top NFL – he's already a top NFL quarterback given how well he's performed. But he could have been considered a possible legend had he won the game. 2 Super Bowls in his first 2 seasons or 2 in his first 3 seasons, something like that. Just crazy. The defense, like I've said, Patriots people thought they had zero chance given their last two performances in the Super Bowl. The controversy of Deflategate looming from the AFC Championship game. I still think the Patriots would have won that game had they not cheated, but they decided to anyway. And then, like you said, Seattle was up 10 entering the fourth, and the Patriots come back and then driving down. You don't hand it to beast mode inside the 5-yard line. That's just mind-boggling to me. And instead, Russell Wilson decides to throw it to Malcolm Butler. Great defense. The Patriots had planned that out perfectly. If you've seen video in the past, the Patriots knew that formation would come eventually and planned for it. And Malcolm Butler, he couldn't do it in practice. He kept failing. And then when it counted the most, you mentioned Eli Manning, Malcolm Butler, the most unexpected hero of all time, made the play, wins the game. And I feel like just this one, it's also the most viewed television show in history. It had to have been doing something right that the most people ever at one time watch this Super Bowl event. I just took a Super Bowl class at school, so that got pounded into my head religiously. But overall, I think it was a great game. And as once they said, it restarted this Patriots dynasty that we've been now living with for 20 years. And now Tom Brady's going to try to do something with Tampa Bay.
Yeah,
so overall,
it was a great game. I just hated how a terrible call decided it for both teams and kind of kickstarted this Pats dynasty, because I just feel like anyone else would have made the obvious decision, and this wouldn't have been – this is a good game, so it would have been memorable in that sense. But just because someone made a terrible call and cost them the Super Bowl, I don't think that makes it, a great Super Bowl, in my personal opinion. Instead, I think the Eagles-Pats game should be number 2 and was a better football game in general. In terms of underdogs, you mentioned it. Even though they were the first seed, because Carson Wentz went out, they were underdog every game, won every game, and no one thought Nick Foles would have brought them this far. He was good for the Eagles in the past. He had a very good season back in 2013, had 20-plus touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. So he had some skill, had some good games for the Eagles in the past. But I don't think anyone, even in Philly, thought that this guy would carry the load of them losing their MVP caliber quarterback at the end of the season, which is just gut-wrenching for a team to have happen to them. But he leads them to the Super Bowl. And at this point, the Pats look unstoppable. They beat the Seahawks. They beat the Falcons, which, spoiler alert, we both have number 1 in a crazy Super Bowl. And coming into this one, can anyone beat this team? I mean, they got 2 crazy comebacks in 2 Super Bowls prior. And it's looking like the Eagles, they lost the first Super Bowl to the Pats. They were underdogs. And Nick Foles versus the legendary Tom Brady. I mean, it was not looking good for Philly. But boy, did they come through. Gave us memorable moments throughout the game, including, of course, the Philly special, as you mentioned, which teams are repeating to this day because it worked so well. It was a bold, gutsy call that shifted momentum going into the second half. And almost every possession, a score was made. So it was very high offensive game. It was 41-33 final score. So if you like offense, it's a very good game for you as well. And it came down also to the final possession, as it seems to always do with the Pats. Always comes down to the final wire. The past 2 Super Bowls, they led comebacks and won with the last possession. This one was a little different. Instead, the Eagles come through, sack Tom Brady for the first time all game, add a fumble on top of that. The Pats only turnover all game. And with that one very important play, the Eagles win their first Super Bowl ever. And I thought the game was very good from start to finish. The Eagles were underdogs, similar to how the Giants were in years past, and in upsetting the Pats team that looked unstoppable at that point because of prior Super Bowls. They just came back from any deficit possible. And also, I know this is not directly related to the Super Bowl, but the way Philly celebrated and how much this meant to Philly and the whole city was crazy. I've never seen a parade and a riot happen from a Super Bowl quite like the Philadelphia Eagles. And it just embodies how Philly and their fans, and even just the city of Philadelphia, is in general. I thought it was a very great Super Bowl, and I thought it was second on my list.
Not to mention, too, Jason Kelce did not help that at all with that. I don't even know what the heck he was wearing at the parade.
The dog mask?
No, it wasn't the dog mask. It was like that giant hat.
Yeah.
Philly fans lost. You had the guy in the subway who ran into that pole, who you're thinking, like, holy cow, did he just fall into the tracks and get ran over by the train? It's just like that whole thing. Philly fans went crazy for that one. And so, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, we're in the top 3. It's going to come down to bets. Circling back, though, to that the Malcolm Butler play. Sure, you could say blame Pete Carroll for not giving you the Lynch, and he lost him the game. But you got to also credit Bill Belichick and the Patriots coaching staff because they quickly recognized what the Seahawks were doing and adjusted on the fly. Had they been not prepared, who knows? They could have burned a timeout. I don't even know if they had a timeout at that point, and it could have changed the course of that game. And maybe, who knows, that pass gets completed if the Patriots don't have the right personnel in. But
yeah, you make a good point. It was a very good play, great effort by Butler. It's honestly more biased at my point. I just hate how that ended. Like I still don't like it to this day. It was the obvious call. Your whole dynasty possibility just crumbles, and I'm not a fan of it. But I don't really argue. It could definitely be number 2 on the list, just as long as it's not number 1, because we both have Super Bowl 51, the second half century of Super Bowls got kicked off, and what a dramatic fashion it was. I mean, oh my God, this had plays upon plays. I don't even think we could recount all of them on both sides of the ball. I mean, yeah, the Falcons going up 21-3 in the first half. Offense was clicking as it was.
They were up 28-3.
No, in the first half.
Right, in the game itself.
It ended up being 28-3. But that offense all year was another offense like the Broncos we mentioned in the past. And what was the other high scoring offense?
Patriots in 2007.
The Panthers. The Patriots 2007, also the Panthers when they were 15-1. Another offense that was just unstoppable during the regular season. They were clicking on all cylinders in the first half of this game. Devontae Freeman was running all over this pass defense. Julio Jones was making great catches, and they were just clicking, and the Pats couldn't stop them. They were putting tons of pressure on Tom Brady, sagging him, making him feel uncomfortable. He was throwing terrible passes, and Pats looked lost. And once I think Ricardo Allen for the Atlanta Falcons picked off Tom Brady for a pick six, I thought the game was over at that point. And that was before halftime. I thought the game was over before halftime. I think a lot of people, I don't know if you included, that was a turning point in the game. But it looked like this Pats team was just going to crash and burn in the most outstanding way. I'll let you tell the audience what happened if they don't already know.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want to take this whole Super Bowl away.
When it got up 21-3 at halftime, I was face deep in White Castle burgers because I thought this game was over.
This is an odd Super Bowl food. I've never heard.
It's burgers. We had
but like wings or pizza.
Here's what we do at the Melito Super Bowls. We do a bunch of appetizers. White Castle burgers, mini hot dogs, chicken nuggets, pizza bagels, the works. I personally go for the White Castle burgers, and I think I ate about 12 of them. And because I was just like, this game's over. I'm not paying attention. Yeah. And then slowly but surely, the Patriots come back. Storyline. By the way, you forgot to mention one thing. The biggest storyline of this game at all, it was the 5th ring for the Patriots. Tom Brady had missed 4 games prior. So what everyone was saying was going up to – right, the Deflategate. Everyone was saying if the Patriots win, Goodell's going to be very upset. And I wonder what finger Tom Brady was going to put the ring on. If you don't get the innuendo, if you will, I'm sorry for you. But, yeah, the Patriots kept coming back. It was the first overtime game in Super Bowl history. It took 51 Super Bowls for the game to go to overtime. And, unfortunately, the Brady-Belichick Patriots had to do it. And there's just so many questions as to whether or not the era of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick was done. This game cemented that. Like, sure, Super Bowl 49 could have been considered a fluke. Here you go. Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, best coaching duo, coach-quarterback duo of all time. They each get their 5th Super Bowl ring, or as with the Patriots, I should say. And then, the Patriots, James White. You get the Joe Buck call in overtime. It breaks my heart. I like Joe Buck, but I mean, come on. But James White breaks the pylon or breaks the plane into the end zone. Patriots win in overtime, 34-28. And you're like, what the heck happened to the Falcons? Matt Ryan, not Matty Ice. He's Matty, not so nice. Kyle Shanahan couldn't call a good offensive play in life. Julio Jones balled out in that game, by the way. He had that one remarkable catch.
Tremendous catch that people never talk about. And it should have won. It should have sealed the game, stopped the comeback right there. Because the Falcons were up 8 at that point. There was 3 minutes left in the game. They were in field goal range with that catch. All they had to do, was stay in field goal range, kick a field goal. It would have been too much for the Pats to overcome.
It didn't get Matt Ryan.
But instead, the Falcons choke. Matt Ryan gets sacked. A holding call brings him out of field goal range, and they end up punting it to the Pats, who end up driving down the field and scoring to tie the game. And something we didn't mention, it almost all came in the fourth quarter. 19 points were scored by the Pats in just the fourth quarter, which is crazy. And also, one of the most crazy aspects about this, they didn't just have to score like 2 touchdowns and get a field goal as well. They had to get 2 two-point conversions, which is so difficult to do. And if all it takes is 1 2-point conversion to not get converted, and Pats might have lost this game, and the comeback would have came up just this short. But they executed to the fullest extent. And talking about coming through when it counts kind of reminds me of relating it to current events, The Last Dance, how Michael Jordan, when it came down to championships, he got it done. He got into this championship mentality, nothing get in his way. He'll make the plays to win the games that matter. This is when the Patriots have done this their entire dynasty, and Tom Brady has done this his entire career, has countless game-winning drives, including in past Super Bowls. But this was that embodiment and mental strength to the fullest extent here, because he just honed in, was not going to let a 28-3 score in the third quarter deter him from coming back and completing the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest comeback in NFL history, not just Super Bowl history. NFL history, because of how important this game was, how drastic the comeback was, how hard it was for, as I mentioned, 2 touchdowns with 2 two-point conversions in such a short amount of time. Even with the Falcons making some good plays, I mean, they obviously didn't make great plays. They choked this game away. But with the Julio Jones catch, that could have sealed it for him. All that Patriot work would have been for nothing if they just stayed in field goal range. But the defense came through, sacked him, disrupted the entire offense. And Brady, I think, had 4 or 5 touchdowns, something like that. Had great stats. James White balled out. He had 3 touchdowns, arguably what could have been the MVP of that game. And also another great catch. And the Pats have been in a lot of Super Bowls with great catches. Tyree catch, Manningham catch,
Edelman catch,
Kurtz catch, and then the Edelman catch, which was finally on their side. They had 3 great catches they saw almost ruin the game for them. Now they get a miraculous catch for Edelman. Don't even know. I just replayed it again today. I don't know how he caught this. I mean, it should have been intercepted by Ricardo Allen, tipped off his hands, went up straight in the air. There were 3 guys on Edelman.
Should have hit the ground.
Should have hit the ground. It hit someone's arm, was staying in the air. Fumbled it, grabbed it with just an inch off the ground. It was that I could argue that with the Tyree catch. I mean, that was unreal. That was literally, I do not know how he caught that. It just shifted momentum so greatly. Then, as you mentioned, the first overtime game in Super Bowl history, with this huge comeback. I mean, there were so many firsts in this game. It was just a very fun one to watch, even though we weren't rooting for the Pats in this game. It was just crazy to see them come back. And like we said, we thought it was over at that Ricardo Allen interception before the second half. But then I remember watching it. My dad was like, once the Pats scored their first touchdown, my dad's like, watch Brady come back. I was there's literally no way that's going to happen. Do you know how much they're down right now? There's like a quarter and a half left. He's like, I've seen Brady for many years. Watch him come back. And every time they scored a touchdown, I'm like, oh, my God, is he actually going to do this? Oh, my God, is he actually going to do this? He actually did it. Went to overtime. They received the ball, which we mentioned at the start of the podcast. Maybe they should have changed it, let the Falcons have a chance. But at that point, they didn't deserve it. They choked that game away so epically. The Pats drive it down the field. James White gets a game-winning touchdown. And that's one of the most memorable, exciting, crazy, and legendary Super Bowls of all time, never mind just this decade. So I'm glad we agreed. We didn't agree on many of these spots. I don't think we agreed on
any of them.
Placement.
Yeah.
But number one, I don't think anyone can debate, even if you're a Falcons fan, this was a crazy Super Bowl.
Yeah, the thing with this Super Bowl is experience showed on the Patriots side. And it's just one of those things where, because like you said, you didn't think the Patriots were going to come back. I didn't. A lot of people didn't. Because they didn't score that first touchdown until about halfway through the third quarter. And by the way, you mentioned what Brady did. He only had 2 touchdowns in that game. 466 yards. Impressive.
Oh, that's what – he had a lot of yards, not
right.
touchdowns.
He only threw 2 touchdowns. Right. So just overall, the poise that the Patriots showed, that just proves why they are the team of the 2000s thus far. The first 20 years of the 2000s, they are the team.
Yeah, and also that game kind of cemented Brady's legacy as many consider him the GOAT. I mean, going into that game, they're still, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning still have a say. I mean, Tom Brady's great. He's top 3 quarterback, no doubt. But that game, what he did in that game, winning his 5th Super Bowl before he would even win his 6th Super Bowl and really become the GOAT at that point, that game we looked at that team and was like, this is probably the greatest team in NFL history. This is probably the greatest coach, greatest quarterback in NFL history. I don't know if we'll ever see something like this again. Because when you really think about it, in 20 years, they've won as many titles as the next top team has. The Steelers 6, but they've done that since there's the start of their team, way back in like the
70s. They won like 4 in the 70s.
They won most of those way back in the past. So Pats did in 20 years what the next best team did in its entire existence. So that really emphasized how amazing this dynasty was, especially after we mentioned it in this podcast. They had the bumps in the road with the Giants. They didn't win a Super Bowl from 2004 to 2014. Big gap in between, but they had 2 distinct championship dynasties with all the players they had, the coach, the quarterback. It's undeniable that this team changed the NFL forever and is one of the most memorable teams ever.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a perfect place to put a pin in this episode. Here's to the Patriots not winning any more Super Bowls in the 2020s and great games galore. Who knows? Maybe the Chiefs are starting something, having won Super Bowl 54.
I mean, yeah, this new decade got off to a good start. Niners, Chiefs was a very good Super Bowl. So
maybe in 10 years we're still doing this thing and we'll be talking about this game. We'll circle back to this moment right here on May, 14th. There 14th. You go. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's all the time for today, I guess. For Ryan Amick, I'm Tyler Melito. Thank y'all so much for watching. And, yeah, we'll see you next time. Maybe on a couple days. Who knows? Have a good one, everybody.